What just happened? Let's rewind the clock and see what happened in Twin Cities real estate in 2020. First thing we're going to talk about on your How's the Market segment this month is delinquencies. So I have seen a lot of discrepancy between the numbers, but generally because of the pandemic, because so many people lost their jobs, we're seeing a ton of people delinquent on their mortgages or their rent, because obviously no job, they're not making their payments. So what does that mean? First of all, the government, as you probably heard, stepped in and they put a restriction around people getting evicted and foreclosed on, which is good because obviously we don't want a ton of foreclosures to hit the market and everyone to lose their houses. However, currently the numbers are looking at between 10 and 25% of people are delinquent on their mortgages. So that didn't affect us dramatically in the past year. However, once that runs out in either the next month or the next year, depending on if they extend, that could dramatically affect our future looking forward. First of all, let's talk about mortgage delinquencies, and this would apply for renters and for homeowners, but with so many people having lost their job last year, we're seeing a ton of people that are delinquent on those payments. Depending on the news sources you look at and how they divide their numbers, I'm seeing between 10 and 25% of people's mortgages are currently delinquent. The last number I saw was in September, and they were recording 3.4 million people that were currently behind on their payments. Now, obviously, this is primarily affecting the lower income earners. So a lot of people I'm talking to aren't feeling the effects at all. They're just buying and selling, going about life as normal. But it's all of those service industries, the luxury, airlines and everything else that's being affected. And those are the people that we're seeing in delinquencies. Now, it hasn't affected us much yet. However, looking forward, it could have pretty dramatic effects. If you're in that situation, stick around. Point number 3, we're going to talk about what's coming to help with those folks that are currently in delinquency. Number 2, let's talk about the stats of how the market shifted from January through December in 2020. I got them pulled up for you here. We're just talking Twin Cities now. Average sales price. So if you owned an average price point home in January, that home would have been worth $265,000. In December this year, it would have been worth $305,000. So that's a $40,000 increase and 15% appreciation on that home value. So absolutely insane. I mean, you do the math, that's a huge, huge appreciation. Again, normally we should see about a 4% average to grow with inflation. We're over 3 times that, almost 4 times. That's an insane amount of appreciation for 1 year. Next, we look at month supply of inventory. Again, that tells us if we're in a seller's market or a buyer's market, we should be between 4 and 6, and we're currently at 1.8, and that's down from 2.2 at the beginning of last year. So again, almost a 20% decrease in month supply, which means it's incredibly hard for buyers and extremely favorable for sellers. Naturally, that's also affecting the days on market. So we're going from 22 days in January to 18 days now, meaning in just over 2 weeks, 20% less, almost 18% less, homes are selling very quickly. 2 things to note. First of all, with the sale price increase, I do think the average price is going up. However, that's also skewed because we just didn't see a lot of the lower price point homes coming into the market, because they can't afford to, again, because people losing their jobs. We just didn't see the lower price brackets in. And so the average sale price is just higher. Although those homes did grow, when you just take out all of the lower brackets, that shifts our numbers up dramatically. Also, with days of market, we're seeing it so competitive because the month supply that buyers are often just skipping their inspection, which can skew our days of market numbers down, because usually the days of market is still adding up when we're in that inspection period. Buyers are so competitive, many of them are just skipping the inspection, and that's shortening up our days on market. So it's not necessarily that they're off the market that much quicker, but it's just a sign of how competitive things are right now for buyers. Third, we're going to talk about the stimulus that's being proposed. This is from the new Biden administration, and so there's a long road to getting anything approved. However, a few points that I wanted to just point out to you from his stimulus package. First of all, we're talking about $1.9 trillion in stimulus money. $25 billion of that alone is going to landlords, specifically to help with those that aren't able to make rent payments now, so that the landlords can not go under themselves during that rent moratorium that they're going through. $5 billion is helping with homeless protections. I don't know specifically what that is, but I did see it was to help those that became homeless or are currently facing homelessness as part of the pandemic and just generally across the board. We're also seeing 19% of renters are currently behind on their payments. We're also seeing $1,400 in stimulus checks specifically towards people, just like we've seen in the past. They're talking about another round of that and an even bigger one this time, so that'll be very interesting to see. And then finally is down payment tax credit. So they're saying up to $15,000 towards your down payment for first-time home buyers. So they've did this before, with the last big crash during the Bush and Obama administrations, and they're talking about doing this again to enable those first-time buyers to purchase a home. What'll be interesting again though is you can't purchase if you don't have a job, so we need our first-time buyers to be able to get a job so that they can purchase a home. However, this will at least relieve that burden of not having the down payment money as much. This will at least relieve the burden of coming up with as much cash because you weren't being able to save while they were laid off. So hopefully that will help our entry-level buyers, first-time buyers back into the market, stimulus checks, and so forth. Obviously, there's a lot of different legislation this has to go through in order for any of it to come to pass. So we'll see what they're actually able to get done. But regardless, looks like there is some relief coming for those that are struggling. That's your market recap for 2020. Make sure you've liked us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and then share this video with anyone that you know that might be looking for some help. Thanks so much. Have a great day.